All right, and welcome back tonight to No Kings on the Hill with Dr. Hill Law and Joe St. Clair. I'll bring him up in a minute. But tonight we are not doing partisan talking points. We are talking Constitution. If you value separation of powers, article to authority, and the Supreme Court's recent tilt, like, subscribe, and share this episode. Question for the comments: did executive authority grow or merely regain its footing? Drop your thought and let us know. Get a debate going. Tonight, we discuss the Chevron's collapse, examining trade and tariffs ruling with SCOTUS, calling the cartel narco-terror groups what they are, constitutional consequences from the State of the Union, and the cultural war over nationalism we saw happen. So let's begin. For much of American history, the presidency was at odds with the administrative state. Congress delegated authorities broadly, agencies read those authorities expansively, and courts deferred to agencies until recently. Tonight, we discuss the changing landscape since Chevron deference has been overturned by the Supreme Court. While tariff power is being challenged, drug cartels are being declared narco-terrorist organizations, the border is closed, and last night's State of the Union was all about sovereignty, the economy, and enforcement. This isn't happenstance. This is structural. Like we said after a message from our sponsors, we're resetting the constitutional baseline. But first, please check us out at No Kings on the Hill with drlaw.com. You can see the going across the bottom banner there, where you can sign up for free access to our weekly blog and find this in all previous episodes, and let us know what topics you would like to see covered next, and let us know what you think. Also, please join us live for CPAC March 25th to the 28th, along with all of the other Christian conservative superstars on the Patriots Pair Network. Come on out, stop by our booth and say hello. We'll be giving away some free shirts or hats to the first 10 people. So let me go ahead and play the word from our sponsors. Then we will get on with tonight's content.
Heard of Q Broadcast? It's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q Broadcast. For just $60 a month, you'll get access to every channel you could ever want, including HBO, Cinemax, and Starz. And the best part? There are no contracts, no hidden fees, and you're free to cancel anytime. With Q Broadcast, you can enjoy streaming live TV, movies, and top series on up to 5 devices at once. Whether you're at home or on the go, Q Broadcast makes sure your entertainment is always at your fingertips. Imagine being able to watch all your favorite channels from anywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. We're talking about thousands of movies, hundreds of TV series, and a huge library of live channels, all in one place. And don't forget video on demand and pay-per-view events. Those are included at no extra cost, so you'll never miss a big event again. Now, take a second and think about your current cable bill. You're probably paying anywhere between $100 and $300 every month, locked into long-term contracts and hit with surprise rate increases. With Q Broadcast, that's a thing of the past. It's just $60 a month. No contracts, no extra fees, no hidden costs, and no price hikes. Why juggle multiple subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and cable when Q Broadcast gives you everything you need in one convenient package? People everywhere are switching to Q Broadcast, saving money and getting more content than ever before. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and sign up for Q Broadcast today. Just $60 a month, no contracts, no hidden fees. It's time to take control of your entertainment and start streaming smarter.
All right, and welcome back to No Kings on the Hill. Now, Justice Robert Jackson gave us the most important framework for executive power in American history. Tonight, as we look at what's going on in American government, understand that it's not chaos, it is correction. For generations, power slowly migrated away from the Constitution's structure. Congress delegated, agencies interpreted laws broadly, courts deferred, presidents, Republican and Democrat, took actions that were increasingly sheltered by layers of bureaucracy. We got used to it. It became the status quo, but it wasn't what the framers intended. That system leaned on one legal principle, the Chevron deference. When Congress wrote ambiguous laws, agencies could interpret them, and courts deferred to those interpretations under Supreme Court's 1984 decision in Chevron USA, Inc., v. Natural Resources Defense Council. That changed the separation of powers. The power to interpret laws lies with the judiciary. Congress makes the laws, the executive enforces those laws. When Chevron gave agencies power to interpret law, it made those lines of separation blurrier. Now, with the Supreme Court's rolling back of Chevron and Looper Bright Enterprise v. Raimondo, we are seeing a judicial correction. Courts are reclaiming their role. Courts will no longer automatically defer to agencies when a statute is ambiguous. This is not executive overreach. This is the judicial branch reaffirming its constitutional role. And this matters because how you view everything else that's happening today, from trade authority to national security enforcement, depends on how you analyze this ruling. Let's talk about tariffs, for example. The Constitution empowers Congress to regulate commerce, but Congress delegated some of its trade authority to the president through statutes like sections 232, 301, and IEPA. When the president takes action under those statutes, his actions don't need to be analyzed through the lens of who the president is as a person. They need to be analyzed through the lens of delegation. And that framework was provided by Justice Robert Jackson in Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company v. Sawyer. When the president acts with Congress's authorization, his power is at its height. That is category 1. So the key legal question isn't, do you like tariffs? It's, did Congress delegate authority? And is the executive operating within those statutory boundaries? If yes, that's not monarchy. That's constitutional structure functioning as designed. The deeper debate is whether Congress has delegated too much for too long. That's a non-delegation question, and as Chevron fades, those questions will intensify. Now let's move to national security. Calling Mexican drug cartels narco-terrorism terrorists isn't bellicose bluster. It's a designation that already exists within our statutory framework. 8 U.S.C. 1189 lays out 3 criteria to qualify as a foreign terrorist organization. The group must be foreign, must engage in terrorist activity, and must threaten U.S. nationals or national security. These sanctions allow for more tools against the listed organization. It doesn't unlock military force, but it does provide more authority on the statutory level. As a general matter, if the president wants to move against cartels militarily, Congress could only stop him by refusing to declare war, which Congress has done before. In fact, under United States v. Curtis Wright Export Corporation, the Supreme Court has already held that the president cannot be hamstrung by Congress on foreign affairs if Congress chooses to delegate that power. The Constitution issue isn't the president can act against cartels, it's whether or not cartels are conducting terrorist activity that threatens Americans' national security. And obviously, we see it happen in Mexico. That's not hard to argue. If Congress has delegated the president the authority to designate them as terror groups under this Article 2 foreign affairs power, it's not critics can muster some steam. But as mentioned above, this isn't an emotional debate. Statutes were passed, constitutional text was analyzed, and all of this occurred during last night's State of the Union address. President Trump talked about having a sovereign border, about border enforcement, about deportations, about using trade as a leverage, about designating cartels as narco-terrorists. President Trump's restoring clarity and decisiveness to the executive branch. Some applauded these lines from the roof of the chamber. Others hung their fingers out the windows in blatant protest. But this isn't a debate about applauding. It's a debate about philosophy. On one side of the aisle, strong enforcement and American sovereignty is the constitutional vision. On the other side, using unchecked executive action to further a political agenda is scary. We've been divided by this question for the entirety of our country's history. The Constitution left the monarch, but it didn't leave us a dysfunctional government, even though it's pretty dysfunctional right now. Article 2 grants the presidential authority to act as commander-in-chief for a reason. Our founders understood that in times of crisis, the heads of our military should report to one person who can make quick, decisive decisions. And while I don't think we're in a crisis now, we are in 2026 watching the structural boundaries return to their appropriate places. Chevron has been overturned. Congressional delegation to the executive is under the microscope with trade agreements and terrorist designations force us to ask questions about the foreign affairs power. Last night, we got to see President Trump call for the United States to reassert its sovereignty. This isn't about Trump. It's about the structure of our government. When the branches of government have clearly drawn lines, power is accountable. When the lines get blurred, power becomes untouchable, which is what we've seen in the past. Right now, we are watching the lines of our government begin to sharpen once again. The administrative state is under attack. Congress will be forced to either start legislating again or further abdicate their authority. The courts are reclaiming their authority to interpret laws, and the president is acting within his delegated authority and pushing its boundaries. This isn't chaos. This is the Constitution doing exactly what it was intended to do: create fiction between the branches of government and allow them to check each other. The question tonight isn't whether or not Trump is risking civil war by taking America back. The real question is, are we watching executive overreach, or are we watching constitutional realignment? Now, the answer depends on party less than how much you care about structure, because structure matters. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring up Joe, get our multi-stage up here, bring Joe up, and then we will get on into segment one, which is to talk about the Chevron Doctrine. So Chevron allowed agencies to interpret ambiguous statutes with judicial deference. That effectively transferred interpretive authority from Article 3 courts to executive agencies. Looper Bright dismantled that structure, and the court said judges interpret law, not agencies. This does three things: weakens bureaucratic insulation, forces Congress to legislate precisely, increases presidential accountability. Then increasing I don't know why I somehow got that top, but Chevron was not constitutionally mandated. It was judicially created. If its fall restores textualism. So, question for the audience in the comments: did Chevron create stability or unaccountable bureaucracy? What do you think on that too also, Joe?
Definitely unaccountable bureaucracy, clearly. And I remember when it got overturned, there's this huge panic on the left, and I guess what you call the central right, the Republicans in name only. And they're like, how is our government going to run? And it was like, before the Chevron Doctrine, it ran just fine. And the truth is that Congress shouldn't be, giving away its powers. And just like you said, this was a judicial power grab, and it was given to the executive agencies, agencies under the executive.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, well, at that time they were trying to, that's why they did so much to try to separate the administrative agencies, trying to call them administrative agencies instead of executive, because they were trying to create like a fourth branch of government, when in reality, because that's what Trump is doing, is he's forcing them to admit that there's only three branches, that the administrative is not administrative, it's the executive branch. It's agencies under the executive, and forcing them to either say, hey, this is either executive authority or this is legislative authority or it's judicial. Right. You're going to have to pick.
And well, you kind of hit the head on the nail there, because I think you can tell that I already said that it was a disaster. And then I, obviously I'm a little bit biased towards that inclination that, yes, these should be, controlled and subservient to the executive, because that's the way our government should be structured. And that's the way it's intended to be structured. But, it's like you said, it was grabbed through judicial precedent. But I think it's kind of in line with what the judiciary has always done, which, going back to, judicial review, the very first case, Marbury versus Madison, that was not in the Constitution. That was, kind of a in the moment compromise that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time came up with, saying, hey, we have the right to interpret the law, because there really wasn't a whole lot written into the Constitution about how the judiciary was to behave. It was just, they were supposed to, mediate between the states.
Yeah, because they aren't supposed to be a co-equal branch. They've tried to make themselves that. People have argued that there's it was two co-equal branches with a lesser equal branch. To just like yesterday, I was arguing with that one kid. I was like, well, technically, Trump doesn't have to listen to the Supreme Court or the federal courts. I said, now, while he's ignored the district courts, he has listened to the Supreme Court president, the Supreme Court rulings, even though technically he doesn't have to, because he is immune from prosecution while he's in office. But also, I think another thing is what the judiciary did is here, by reversing Chevron, they grabbed back their ruling, because inadvertently they had said, oh, we'll let the agencies decide. But that was all through, this is more in depth than we're going in this show, but through the administrative law justice system, which aren't really real judges or real justices, but they try to call themselves that. And it was allowed to make the decision be through that, versus it's supposed to either be what's the court supposed to rule, is this policy meet what's actually in what is written in that legislation, or doesn't it? And Chevron allowed the ability for the judges to say, you know what, hey, that's ambiguous. We're not sure. So this looks like a reasonable, whatever the administrative agency, what they're saying looks like it could be reasonably read between the lines or similar to what the legislature meant. And so we're going to do that. And that's almost kind of like when we look at IEPA. I'll bring this up. I'll bring it up in a minute once we get into segment 2 about powers and tariff authority. But that also, with the IEPA ruling and the way they rolled in it almost goes back to the way what we're talking about here with Chevron deference. Because if Chevron deference hadn't been overturned, then it wouldn't have mattered whether anybody could have said the lesser or, meaning it said Congress and IEPA said he can embargo. Well, usually you can be that lesser, or you can do something that's lesser than what the statute states, or up to what the statute states. Well, it'd be kind of obvious to think that, okay, tariffs are lesser than an embargo. But because they decided, but now that Chevron deference is gone, pretty much the judge rolled right, because they're saying, well, it did not say tariffs or revenue directly, so it did not mean that, or did not assume that, because it didn't say that, it can't be that. And that almost goes back to we're kind of now seeing with Chevron deference gone, that deference wasn't given to the agency per se, or the executive in that fact.
Yeah, but so here's the thing with admin law and with these, it's like you said, these guys aren't judges, but there's so many unique areas of law and systems they built. If you've dealt with veterans disability law, if you've ever had to apply for housing benefits, the termination of Section 8, just there's so many things that this bleeds over into. And usually these people, or even child protective services, right? When you have, it's not even a psychologist, it's like a social worker who is deemed to make, a ruling, and it's kind of like they've been deputized by the judge underneath this admin law, category, but they themselves don't really have the expertise that is prerequisite. And each time that they create one of these structures, it creates this massive complicated system, because that's what they're designed to do. Is it's designed to keep people from getting out and from accessing the system, right? There's a reason to it. But at the same time, what it does is it constructs these giant, huge systems of siphoning off from our political economy. Because as you're employing all these different agents and psychologists, doctors, environmental regulators, all these people that are making these, it's a huge class of people that now have a vested interest and depend on the federal government for their job. But at the same time, these are the people that are the most office spacey on earth. Like, right, when you walk into the DMV, and the people who are making the decisions, if you ever get a DUI and you're going to lose your license, it's not a judge who's making the determination, it's a DMV employee. And I think anybody that's dealt with this class of people knows it's just like office space. They're not treated very well. They're paid okay, but they're not paid extremely well. They're usually not very well trained or educated, and because of that, they have a chip on their shoulder, and they like to make things onerous and uncomfortable for the people who are accessing these services and utilizing the system. It's just, to me, it's anti-human. I kind of want to live my life like I'm at summer camp. I want to be able to go to work hard, play hard, enjoy my time with my family, not be plugged in all the time, enjoy the weather. And then I got to go to the DMV, or I got to go to VA and deal with these people. I got to get on the phone with these guys and navigate through their AI. And anyone who's been in the military knows exactly what I'm talking about. Because when you institutionalize any of these systems, this is the effect, and it'll always be the effect. And it's one thing that the ruling was made, but the headwinds against this system, because again, this is its own political unit, and there's so much money tied to it that they don't want to give up their power, and they're doing everything they can to keep the status quo as is. But I really think that there's so many areas and ways that the Trump administration really needs to step up and continue doing what they're doing, and just keep putting their foot on the gas pedal. Because if we could solve these issues today, 10 years from now, the trajectory, like, this is the chance for us to change the trajectory of our country once and for all,
Oh yeah, and that's what I was saying that's why I wanted to get to cover the Chevron a little bit, is because what we saw with the Supreme Court ruling is kind of our first sign of what the Chevron's going to affect. Because if they had an overturned Chevron president, then President Trump would have been good using IEPA. But since Chevron's overturned, now that ambiguous statement doesn't fall anymore, or the deference doesn't go back to the agency. Because while they say Trump's implementing these tariffs, no, he's implementing them through his agency, because it's the Secretary of Commerce, the Commerce agency, that actually implements them with his approval. And same thing with sections 232, 122, 301, and 338, is they're all done through the Secretary of the Commerce agency with the president's approval. So we're now seeing what Chevron did. We're now starting to see the effects of the Chevron deference being done, what's going to happen with it being overturned. And it's saying Congress, okay, when you make these legislation, you're going to have to stop being so broad. You're going to have to start working with the professionals, with the people that know that legislation, and start writing it as unambiguous, making it unambiguous, so they know exactly what it means. If they wanted to do something that has to be set to do that, it can't be in a lesser, or the having the deference preferred to the individual agency to decide what they meant, as long as it's not outside of a certain substantial aspect. And even to the point, I don't know how much this rule would be made, but before Chevron deference was overturned, they had made it to where if it goes too far out of what Congress stated, then both houses had to vote on it, or Congress had to approve the change. But I don't know how much that one will really be effective now, because of with Chevron deference, there should be no more of, and it should help, since nothing can be really deferred to them. It should help get with what Trump's trying to do, is hopefully eventually get rid of the administrative law justices and put everything back into the jurisdiction of the actual courts themselves with real judges. Because I know a lot of the people argue is that that the administrative law justices actually violate the constitutional rights, because you don't have the ability to ask for a jury of your peers with the ALJ. Yeah. You just get either one justice or a panel of judges that aren't even really true justices per se.
Yeah. And then they would say, oh, that's because it's a privilege, not a right, or this is something extra. But, again, it's like anytime that you walked into a place and there is a government employee at any level that is enforcing policy that doesn't exist, or they think that somehow the policy written in their books is somehow higher than or stratified above any actual law. And a great example of this is, hey, you can't film here, right? You see all those videos. The reason they have this mentality is because this system was set up. And, I'm going to backtrack real quick and just give a little bit of educational history on the system of the courts that exists in the United States, which for the most part, 49 out of 50 states, it's from English common law descending from Roman law. And we have kind of two court systems, right? We have the civil and we have criminal court. And those are both descended from two different sets of courts in medieval England. One was the King's Court, right, where just like in the Bible, the woman who wanted to chop the baby up came in front of King Solomon. And that's the court, kind of the criminal court, the criminal justice court system that it originated from the King's Court. And then the other set of courts were the mercantile trade guild courts. So really, these courts they started doing their own thing without the sanction of the king. And later on, the king gave them, rights over these areas, and then maritime courts were set up from those. So it really is important to realize, like, just like the judges in the Bible, how they were acting like kings, the structure of judges in England, where obviously that's the kind of genetic lineage of our constitutional system, is through England and the Magna Carta. This was designed to give these judges essentially part of the king's power to make these decisions. So that was not supposed to be the case in the United States of America.
Oh, no.
However,
my whole book on is administrative law and constitutional actually goes back to the Magna Carta and talks about all the plenary powers of the actually almost relates what's going on in the administrative state to the star courts, which even Europe ruled unconstitutional and out of constitutional. But so anybody that doesn't know is like, okay, so what they held in Looper was that the Administrative Procedure Act requires courts to exercise their independent judgment in deciding whether an agency has acted within its statutory authority, and courts may not defer to an agency interpretation of law simply because a statute is ambiguous. Chevron is overruled. Article 3 of the Constitution assigns to the federal judiciary the responsibility and power to adjudicate cases and controversies, concrete disputes with consequences for the parties involved. The framers appreciated that the laws judges would necessarily apply in resolving those disputes would not always be clear, but envisioned that the final interpretation of the laws would be the proper and peculiar province of the courts. The Federalist number 78, 525 Hamilton, as Chief Justice Marshall declared in the foundational decision of Marbury v. Madison, it is emphatically the province and duty of the judicial department to say what the law is. In the decades following Marbury, when the meaning of a statute was at issue, the judicial role was to interpret the act of Congress in order to ascertain the rights of the parties. Decatur v. Paulding. The court recognized from the outset, though, that exercising independent judgment often included according due respect to executive branch interpretations of federal statutes. Such respect was thought especially warranted when an executive branch interpretation was ensued roughly contemporaneously with enactment of the statute and remained consistent over time. Luckily, the court went away from that. But I just want to kind of cover it was because it covered Marbury v. Madison. Like you said, I'm not going to cover the whole freaking. I'm not going to read the whole review, but
yeah,
I just wanted to read that section of it. But let's go ahead and get on to segment 2, trade powers and tariffs. So the Constitution gives Congress authority over trade, but Congress delegated substantial discretion. If the president imposes tariffs under statutory delegation, that is Category 1 authority under Youngstown. The legal debate is not, can the president impose tariffs? It is, did Congress delegate constitutionally, and should Congress reclaim authority? If courts narrow delegation, power shifts back to Congress. If not, executive flexibility remains. Trade authority debate is really a non-delegation debate. So for the audience on a poll, should Congress directly vote on tariffs, yes or no? And then we can go ahead and talk about what do you think on the ruling that they made, and what should they take the full power back, or
which section was that? I'm sorry, I have your text pulled up.
I was going segment 2. Should Congress directly? I was going to the tariffs, and I said, should Congress directly vote on tariffs? Yes or no? I was saying that for the comments. We have. Oh, I don't see anybody being active in the comments today, even though
I don't see the comments up today. I can't.
I've got them up. Like I've got them up, but I will say this is we are definitely seeing got a whole lot more views today. Our views are back up. TikTok X is finally reposting out again, so we're back up in the multi-hundred views. So that's nice. But yeah, so
I don't see. I just did the test in the comments. Can you see my test? I can't.
No, I can't. I don't know what's going on with the comments. For some reason, they're not working. It's weird. Like I don't even see. I'm looking in my YouTube studio. I don't see any comments from my YouTubes. So if they are commenting, they're commenting from X, but they're commenting not from my X. They're commenting from PPN or Law Natives. So let me see if I can actually pull up. Let me see if I can pull up PPN, the Patriots Prayer, and then see it from there. See if I can see it from the Patriots Prayer Network. Go live on there, and then go to the live on there and see if I can see the comments from that. Okay, so there's no comments on PPNs. Let me try to pull up another X channel, another one with X on it, and I will go to see if I can pull up Law Natives, and that's where the other majority of our views are coming from. So I'll go to Law Native Patriots, see if I can see any comments on his. Okay, so I'm not seeing anybody in the chat. We're just not getting any chats right now because I've got both of theirs up. I don't see anything in the chat messages on theirs, and I'm not seeing anything in the chats on ours. So I guess we can just keep on going. But yeah, so I heard so many people arguing that, oh, Trump doesn't have the constitutional authority to impose tariffs. Well, you're right. He doesn't. He wasn't given the constitutional authority, but Congress gave him the authority through delegating their powers and constitutionally through legislation. Now, so the argument then comes back, should Congress take that back? But in today's age, can Congress really take it back? Because we would never get anything done. I mean, when was the last time we had a trade agreement that we actually had a trade agreement signed and truly ratified through Congress that we had a 2/3 vote? I mean, really, it's like they
Never.
can't get together. I mean, that's why Trump was able to repeal the Paris Climate Accord, because it was an accord. It wasn't a trade agreement.
It's the monetary and financial system that allowed them to do that. Because so long as they have a monopoly and a cartel, the private bank, where they essentially print their own money into existence and consolidate their assets, they can continue to lobby Congress. They can continue to pay judges indirectly through, vacations and, quid pro quo with three disconnections in between, right, to obfuscate it. And I mean, this is one of the reasons that they ruled against the tariff. This is why the Supreme Court ruled against the tariffs, because they are owned and captured. And the truth is that, like, if we can't implement tariffs, and if we can't get if we can get our financial system in order, then we are not going to be free. Our country has been lost. And that's why this fight is so important, because you can't have, like, people made a huge deal when they're like, oh, Russia influenced the 2016 election. And it was like, Americans still voted, right? However, there's a huge difference between if Russia was paying people to vote a certain direction, that would actually be stealing the election. But that's what's going on. It's just 10 steps removed. And, there's a reason that this class that supports this also supports globalization, because they're not loyal to our country. And they use this false sense of, oh, like, I'm a human, I'm empathetic, like, we're all just members of Earth. And it's like, no, to them, we are an underclass. They themselves practice and embrace eugenics and think you're a cattle and that you're stupid enough to fall for the trick. And you're just not, none of us are smart enough to analyze their system to see what's going on. You listen to Jeffrey's episode, like his interview with Steve Bannon, he's saying this. And I've been called a conspiracy theorist for years, but all I did was turn 15 and 16, 2008, when Ron Paul got up on the stage and started talking about this very issue. And he said, read Thomas Paine's Common Sense, read The Road to Serfdom. Like, this is a wealth of knowledge that when we talk about American exceptionalism, this used to be what Americans held dear and knew. This was ingrained in every American, right? When our boys were sent off to World War II, they knew this, they believed this. And that's why so many people today are disconnected and easily manipulated, is because they weren't raised underneath this banner. You call it whatever you want to call it. Like, they were not properly inducted into the American system. They don't understand that when we don't aggressively defend our system of freedom, then system of slavery comes, and it's a lot worse. And the outcomes and the violence are much, much worse than what it would take, the overt acts of evil that might take to keep our system in place.
And to answer the question, Jim, I agree with you. I would rather pay a voluntary tax through tariffs than a compulsory income tax. And I honestly agree. That's what Trump's overall arching idea behind this is you can't just go in and say, hey, we're going to totally eliminate the income tax and then figure out how they're going to pay everything because we came off of the gold standard or silver standard or whatever, any of that. And so we don't have it. We have to have they have to have some way to be able to at least pay the interest on all the money they keep borrowing. But I have a feeling I think this is a way to show them, hey, look, we do these tariffs and we grow our economy back up, and we're able to show a positive income the other way. And eventually we can start lowering we can go away from the other taxes. It's just not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take and make sure that we get out and we vote for this midterm election, and that we make sure that we keep control of the House and the Senate, if not gain some seats and beat the historically where we lose one of the houses. And then we got to make sure that J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio win presidency, and we got to make sure they win the presidency in 2028. Because if we just have one president come 2028, if we end up with a Democratic president come 2028 that's back being part of the globalist, the Trilateral Commission, or a member of the Bilderberg Group, then we're going to be back right where we were, and President Trump will not have set them back that much. That's why they're pushing so much against illegal immigration, and they're pushing so hard again. They wouldn't even stand up last night to say that they would support putting Americans before illegal immigrants, because right now they're depending on illegal immigrants for votes. They're dependent on them for extra seats in the House and extra electoral college votes, because they know that if President Trump can average at least 3 million like Obama did, or exceed Obama's deportation rates and get 4 or 5 million a year for the next 3 years, and deport somewhere between 10 and 20 million illegal immigrants over his 4-year term come the 2030 census, they are going to be hurting substantially. Just currently right now, if you just take the CNN's poll of net negative migration coming out of some blue states, positive migration going into red states, blue states are going to lose 7 seats, red states are going to gain 7, and the blue wall that would have gotten Kamala to 270 will now only get her to 263. Now you add another 10, 20 million illegal immigrants into that, Texas goes solid red, California maybe turns red for once, and you possibly end up with no Democratic president and maybe even the House and Senate control for the next 10 years, possibly 20 years. We could pull a 20-year like the Democrats did from 33 to 53. So that's where this, all the them being against the terrorists and pushing everything, and won't even acknowledge when Trump's got to win. And even some of the stuff last night that the Democrats stood up for, it was only a couple. Like most of them, I don't see how you can win an election when President Trump says anybody who agrees that their job is to put Americans first before legal immigrants stand up, and not a single Democrat stood up. That just makes you show that Democrats don't care about their constituency. They only care about winning and power, which unfortunately puts them with going for illegal immigration, because they complain about the bill that we didn't pass, the so-called bipartisan immigration bill that didn't pass under Biden was really an amnesty bill. So it's getting ridiculous. So we've got to face reality here. I mean, and look at we've got to get rid of, like President Trump said last night about mail-in ballots, they need to be only for people who are traveling, can't, or like physically ill or disabled, or too old to travel or get out of their house. Other than that, all mail-in ballots should be canceled. And we should. Honestly, I think they should go to having the signature be a thumbprint, because the problem is they say they verify signatures, but I talked to somebody who actually worked as a vote counter and stuff, and she said when they were comparing signatures, they would let them do a signature as an X or a squiggly line. You couldn't even tell if the signature matched the name, like it wasn't matching the name that was on the signature, didn't necessarily match the name that was on the mail-in ballot. So how do you know that was really who did it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of that. My signature when I was younger, I used to sign out everything. And then now I'm not going to tell you how I do my signature, but I was in the military, so I had to sign 10,000 documents.
Oh, I know. I was military and I was a truck driver. Trust me.
Yeah, exactly.
Even towards the end of my truck driving career, when the majority of stuff was done online, the federal government was still behind and still wanted you to kill 2 trees just to get hired on. And even if you had filled out the application online, you had to go back and sign everything in pen, because they wanted a wet copy of everything. So even if you'd done everything online, they still wanted the wet copy. So you had to go back and you had to sign every single document, fill out every document, even though necessarily they didn't make you fill it out with the pen. You had to go back and sign every single document in pen. And with trucking companies, that could be a couple hundred pages, if not almost near 1,000. Like literally, you spend 2 to 3 days. You usually spend about the first 2 days of your truck driving orientation just filling out paperwork.
We became a paperless Air Force in 2006. And when I got out in 2020, everything was printed 10,000 times. It's insane how rigid those systems are. I mean, I get it. They don't want to do there's so much inertia, so much resistance to change. But That's the reason you don't set up these kind of systems, because they're so hard to get rid of.
And that's
But
what Trump's trying to do now, is like, that was the whole point of Doge, was to get rid of all these antiquated systems that were literally double and triple just because of the fact you had to print out the paper. It was to bring it was to AI more stuff and get more stuff online. Obviously, there's certain stuff, especially top secret and classified material, that you don't want on any type of internet or any type of necessarily servers, unless they're in a SCIF or something, or even then there's a lot of stuff you still want on paper because you want to make sure that it's protected. I understand that,
but
that's
a juxtaposition, because
that's
it's
but that's also a small percentage of the government.
It's a great juxtaposition, because it's like, why are we having to sign 2,000 times to check out, one canister of ammo, and then when it comes to voting, no, we don't need that. Like, it's just flying in the face of practical reason and logic to anybody who has half a brain and isn't brainwashed and wanting their team to win through some, questionable methods. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, both sides, but that's why we've got, I think that's why this kind of going back to last week's, but I don't think the SAVE Act goes far enough. We definitely need it passed, but it doesn't go far enough. We need another nationalized federal elections, kind of like Trump talked about, but that do not violate the that does not violate the separation of the states' rights powers, stays within the constitutional agreement, which is mainly just monitoring, verifying, checking chain of custody, keeping track of all that, ensuring, because also the SAVE Act gives them the ability to check people's citizenship and actually access DHS websites and everything. I know the recent Supreme Court ruling just came through that IRS can share their data with DHS or something like that, or something that will help verify illegal immigrants a whole lot better. That was a big ruling that'll help. There's some big cases that have been coming out.
I pray that they put also safeguards in place so that isn't, used against the American people. But we'll see, I guess, right?
Yeah. So
it is challenging, because we have to get these people out of our. It's like, hopefully, like, once they're out and once there's a secure border, there should be no reason to have, ICE doing what they're doing any longer. So,
no. Well, we're about to get to that part. So go on to segment 3, cartel, narco-terrorism, and Article 2. Drug cartels are officially considered narco-terror groups. It's significant because under U.S. law to designate an FTO, you must prove 1, they're a foreign organization, 2, terrorist activity, 3, threat to U.S. nationals or national security, which further defines as imposing financial sanctions, allows prosecution of material support, immigration enforcement, and seizures of assets. And Curtis Wright affirmed the president has wide latitude in foreign policy. Designation is not an invasion force. It's enforcing already written laws. Opponents will say it's going to war. The constitutional debate is whether international cartel violence is national security. And if it is, designation is well within the parameters of the law. If not, then it's criminal statute, which is what you decide. And also, I think we're clear where that lies, especially after the most recent, what happened in Mexico over this last weekend. I mean, for us to see thank God for, even though J. Edgar Hoover went a little too far with stuff, thank God for him, because if he had allowed the mob, the American mob, to keep growing, they could have turned out like the cartels. But these cartels are not what Democrats try to act like. Oh, they're not just some little gang or something. They are paramilitary forces. They have managed to, all that billions of dollars worth of brand new military equipment that Biden decided to leave over in Afghanistan. A lot of that we are now seeing has made its way over to Mexico, over into the hands of the cartels, because they have got military level armored vehicles. They have got RPGs. They have got surface to air missiles. They have got mortars. They've got more than just a couple AKs and some 6 hours or a shotgun. And so I don't think it's any question now what needs to be done with what after what we've seen, when some people are trying to say, oh, it's a civil war in Mexico, but not really, because it's not all the people fighting the government. It's a paramilitary force fighting at the government. And it's why Trump has been pushing so hard. And I think he has now been vindicated for the moves that he's been making towards the drug cartels, because now we see how dangerous they are.
So, okay, that one thing that I like to point out here is that, okay, so this is true of the secret oil fleet too, where obviously there's been a stalemate in Russia for the better part of 3 or 4 years, going far back to 2014. So you can't, like, basically, the United States has been sandbagging itself, because why have past admins not been able to take these actions? And people are like, oh, this is all Trump's fault. There's so much violence in Mexico. Now Americans are getting targeted. It's like, these people were hostile to us before this. And the fact that now that they're not able to do what they were doing underneath the surface, and if you think that the United States government didn't tolerate this, completely wrong. Even another example I provide is dark web, Tor. How did that get created? It got created by intelligence services in the United States. They wanted to send secret information from point A to point B, but they didn't want people to be oh, this is obviously intelligence. There's 2 secret terminals, right? So what do? They open it up to criminal networks, allow them to use it so that they can increase traffic, so that they can send their message below, the noise of the overall volume of the illegal activity. So that's true what was going down in Mexico too. Like our intel agencies and, various federal entities, they've had a heyday down there for decades. And it's not done the American people any good. It's obviously funneled drugs. It's destabilized the region. That's a key contributor to, illegal migration. But it's also important to say, like, within Mexico itself, just like American is a constructed identity, right? Like, there's no American ethnicity. We like to think of Mexican as an ethnicity. It's not. It's a hybrid collection of people who have Aztec DNA, Spaniard DNA, and then tons of Central American, like various other tribes, right? So they have this, but within their collective psyche, just like we have our George Washington, just like we have, our American mythos, they have the mythos of, we finally got free from Spain, and then we got free from France, and then our last act of freedom was against the United States and the Mexican, and they think the land that we bought from them at the end of the world war is still theirs, even though how did they acquire it? The same way we acquired it. And they have this entire concept of La Raza, and the cartels are right involved with this. So we do not need enemies when we have allies that are becoming staging grounds for destabilizing our entire country, right? So the fact that these steps were taken in this level of, these people were always willing to target Americans. They're always willing to target Canadians. The only difference now is that there's a light shining on it and the cockroaches are running to the hills. So don't blame Trump for the actions of others, because he's finally putting a stop to it, to what the CIA and the FBI turned, and the DEA too. Like, look at the fast.
The CIA and was supporting this stuff. I mean, they were literally running their own drugs through South America, and then through Iran and Afghanistan and everything like that. It's not just stuff you see on movies, people. A lot of those movie ideas do come from reality. I mean, that's stuff that they were doing. And that's why the so-called war on drugs was never really a true war on drugs. They were just pretending like it. They never did anything. And now you see what the real war on drugs looks like. And you see how bad the Mexico has, when the Mexican government literally is that scared, or the cartels they get one of their leaders taken out, and all of a sudden they start going and bombing everybody and start attacking and burning cities down pretty much. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Seems very similar to other behavior, right?
But hopefully Scheinbaum either will leave or will allow us to bring our special forces in there, do limited stuff to take out the cartels, because unfortunately, if you just cut the head off the snake, the cartel, they'll be replaced. We got to take out the whole infrastructure. We've got to take out the whole organization. We can't just take out the head, because there's always going to be somebody that replaces back that place. You've got to get the total corruption out, that level of corruption out of Mexico, which, like you said, it does affect our border, because if Mexico's safe and doesn't have all this stuff going on with cartels, then people aren't going to want to leave their country. they're going to want to stay home. They're going to be able to become successful and their economy and their country grow. But when you have drug cartels, I think last night when I was on my live, somebody was saying that it's like they're like the 5th largest employer in Mexico is the cartel. I mean, that's insane. When your 5th largest employer is an illegal paramilitary terrorist organization.
Yeah.
And you're,
I mean, their president is reminding me of Tim Walz because she's, up in arms about this. And then you have governors underneath her who are saying, no, we've wanted this for a long time. So like, where does she owe her allegiance? Like, and the fact that the cartels held so much power in Mexico, it's almost like it's per fascia that the president who was elected is going to have to be, under their sway to some extent. So get her out of there. Sorry, hate to say it. Like, we did it with Pancho Villa. We've done it with a few different leaders in their past. And like, I'm all for everyone having self-determination and sovereignty, but it's the same thing with Venezuela. Like, if Maduro wants to kidnap American citizens and target us, then we're going to defend ourselves. And that applies to people that are, it's this Pakistan, Afghanistan, this happens all the time. Taliban from Afghanistan used Pakistan to attack into Afghanistan. And the Taliban in Pakistan went to Afghanistan to attack Pakistan. We are a first world country. We're not Afghanistan. We're not Pakistan. We're not going to fall for that. Like, and everyone's talking now about the British system. People are finally awakening. And that's exactly why I liked F.A. Hayek. That's exactly why I liked Ron Paul, because they spell this system out. And you just got to read a little bit to understand how it functions and works. And just like they constructed the Duran line, the Pike-Sicko Agreement that divided up the Middle East, divided up Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and they created all these artificial social divisions in these countries that shouldn't exist in the first place because they're not stable political units. That's what they're trying to do to us. Why?
Yeah.
Because they don't like, a population of educated, highly affluent, but not elite, not upper class, right? That's not what we are. And we know, and that's why they despise us, because the truth is that the meritocracy and the exceptionalism of the upper class doesn't exist. Like, they're inheriting their money and then they're using dirty tricks to keep everybody else poor. And that's why they despise the American system, because we said no to that.
Yep. So let's get on to segment 4, State of the Union from last night. So last night's speech emphasized border closure, deportation enforcement, narco-terror designation, trade leverage, and sovereignty. But the chamber told a cultural story. Patriotism celebrated by some, visible dissent from others, and obviously the 30 or some odd that sent out decided that they'd rather go dance with people in frog suits. This reflects deeper philosophical division. Is enforcement strength constitutional duty or authoritarian drift? Is national identity unifying or polarizing? The Constitution assumes national sovereignty. The disagreement is about its application. Answer this in the comments. Is the administrative state constitutional? Has Chevron's fall restored balance, or started to at least? Should Congress reclaim tariff authority? Are cartels national security threats, which we kind of just discussed just now? And is border enforcement an executive duty? And another one I was going to talk about, this court case just came today. I made a post about it today. Is there was a judge that had ruled that President Trump's third country policy for deporting criminal legal immigrants who their own countries decided that they were so bad that they can't even keep them, or it won't take them, that he was deporting them to another country, that's unconstitutional. And I'm sorry, but how is it unconstitutional to want somebody out of our country and send them to another one where their own country will not take them back due to how bad a crime they have committed, to how heinous their act is, that their own country of origin doesn't want them? Why should we allow that to stay on our city streets, to stay in our communities, to threaten our children, to threaten our wives, to threaten our families? And as we saw last night from President Trump having people there, Joshua Nungary's family and the different angel moms that were there at the State of the Union last night. It is getting ridiculous that the left would rather sit down and support illegal immigrants versus support American citizens. I'm sorry, but when they take their constitutional oath as a House member or a member of Congress, whether it's the House or the Senate, they literally swear to represent their citizens, not the American taxpayers, not people who have come here illegally, not people who should not be here, not criminals, but American taxpaying citizens. That is their job, plain and simple. And it seems like the Democrats have just lost that, or it's because their Trump derangement syndrome is just so bad that they can't see reality, they can't see anything, and they would just rather go with lies. I mean, look at California's governor, the California governor, Gavin Newsom, in his speech in Georgia the other day. He literally sounded like the most racist, bigoted idiot I'd ever seen. Trying to sit there and think that, oh, just because he's in a black caucus or whatever, that he's sitting there with the majority of black and Hispanics, that saying that somehow that they would believe that he could say and be cool that he lost his birth certificate at 7 years old and your parents wouldn't even give it to you. And that somehow as the governor of a state, he doesn't know how to go acquire his birth certificate. That somehow they would believe that. And then to sit there and say, I'm not saying I'm you, but I'm like you. I'm a 960 SAT guy, like blah, 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 blah. Like
he's trying to be the,
he's trying to be
the everyday man, and he sucks at it.
I'm saying, like, what? Just because they're black or Hispanic, they can't score above a 960 on their SAT. They can't be highly intellectual or intelligent. I mean, that's racist and bigoted itself. And then sit there and say, oh, I claim he can't read. I'm like you because I can't read. So what? He thinks just because everybody out there is black, they can't read. I mean, that just shows how ignorant and racist the left is. You don't see Trump saying that. You don't see Trump going out there and saying any of the racist shit that the left is saying, but yet they call him and everything he does the next coming to Jim Crow and the racist and everything, and actually everything they do trying to pander and stuff shows how racist they truly are. I don't see how America's Democrats can't wake up and see that.
I think deep down they do. I think a lot of them do. And people always return to their abuser, and they return to the type of like environment they grew up in. So it's almost like they return to it over and over again. And we do that as individuals. We do that as collectives. I do want to make a comparison real quick though. Well, one thing with Gavin Newsom is I just saw a picture today of him featured in the San Francisco Chronicle in 1991. San Francisco's Children of the Rich with 4 other guys. Like, this dude is an American psycho, rich, like narcissist, self-worshiping, like freak. Like, I hate to say it. And, you know, people say, oh, I listen to it. It's not racist. And I'm like, okay, I'll play devil's advocate. I get what you're saying, but this was to a specific group in Atlanta, specifically by a black Democrat organization. So that's not really fair. The other thing I'll say is another criticism that was made, not towards Gavin Newsom, not towards the left, but almost a mirror comparison, right, was made to Donald Trump and the hockey team, saying when they said, hey, we're going to have to invite the women to the White House too, and everyone goes, ha, 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 ha. They all go, that's sexist, right? And I'm like, how is that sexist? Like, he's not saying that. Like, what do you think he's communicating that's sexist? He's making a joke that maybe women's sports aren't as popular as men's sports. That's the basis of the joke, I think, right? Like, yeah, you guys won, but you're no better than the girls are, right? And then all the guys laughed. So there's nothing inherently sexist about that, but I just find it funny that, you know, left and right, the left sees Donald Trump as sexist in one comment, but they can't possibly fathom that. But I don't think what Trump said was sexist, but I just think it's a funny comparison because clearly there's no intellectual consistency.
Oh, yeah. No, it's like, I was like, he didn't say anything racist or sexist or that he wouldn't invite the women or he wouldn't call them. He never said that. And actually, I remember, I think he actually did call the women, and he's going to see them in the next couple of days or something. So, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous what the left is doing. And it's funny how President Trump was, I wish I had the videos pulled up to play, but there's this black pastor, and he's sitting there and he's doing a podcast. I think it was with LeBron James, and he's going back and he's talking about how all this stuff how Trump was never considered racist before he ran as a Republican. How back when I forgot who it was. I think it was Reverend Jesse Jackson, whatever, when he went to go run for president. President Trump was actually thinking about running for president that year too, but he decided not to because he's like, hey, I'm not going to run against my friend. I'm going to let my good friend run. I mean, so it wasn't until he was friends with all these, he was never considered a racist person. He was friend with all these black people. Not until he came down the escalator did they start calling him a racist and a bigot. It's somehow that, oh, you can't, and just, I mean, just like they even call black people who are conservatives racist on themselves, and it's ridiculous. Like they'll sit there and say, oh, you're a white nationalist or this or that, when just because they're black and they're a Republican. It's
that's terrible. We call them house N-word, and then they'll say you're an Uncle Tom. Yeah, and then just to add to your point, like I think this did not start with Trump. This actually started with Ron Paul in 2008. This guy, if you look at the Epstein files, they had nothing but vitriol for Ron Paul because they said if he actually wins, we're screwed. So let that be a lesson. You guys, I don't care if you think Trump's on the Epstein list or you think it's whoever. If you want to know who to vote for, Epstein said Ron Paul was his enemy. So we know he's doing something right? So the way they sabotaged him was both Clinton and you know who else manufactured this? Ben Shapiro. He said, Ron Paul, you're anti-Semitic. And then they tried to, suggest that Ron Paul was a racist because he wrote for a conservative magazine in the 80s that happened to have a few people. But I mean, knowing the environment within Texas at the time, it's not, I mean, it was a different world back then, but he never expressed those views himself. And they used that same model that they used to silence Ron Paul and the civil libertarians in the Republican Party. They played it out again. They played it out against Bernie Sanders. They're playing it out again against James Tallarico, which also, he's another Gavin Newsom. He's another Pete Buttigieg. I cannot think of a single good person at this point who's willing to vote Democrat. And he says a lot of the right things, but I'll tell you right now, zero policy.
Like, yeah, and that's what scares me about him is I don't want him to get the Democratic nomination because if we don't end up with a really strong Republican candidate, he seems like he's more moderate, but he's not. He doesn't try to act like this big Democratic socialist, but in reality, he is. He acts more moderate, and I still don't. It doesn't scare me too much because as long as we come out, the math for a Democrat to win a statewide race in the state of Texas right now is literally slim to none. I mean, it's near impossible. Even if they gain like 600,000 votes down in the valley, they'd still be only 2%. They'd still only be within 2% of winning a statewide vote. So I don't think we have to worry about Texas isn't purple. It's not going to go purple. That's their unicorn in fairy dreams. It won't happen. Texas will stay blue. It's been blue since 1976. I think was 1976 was the last time Texas went blue. Since then, it is ever since Reagan, it has gone red. And it's been that way since across the board. So I think maybe we had one Democrat governor in that time, but as far as senators, we have not had a single one. Right now, I guess we're all pretty much done, but I want to say this because it is primaries here in Texas. Go out and vote for Wesley Hunt. This bullshit about him not showing up to vote or messing all these votes. No, he showed up when it mattered. Go look at anybody who has run for higher office when they're either a congressional member or a senator. They have had to mess votes. It's called campaigning. Go look at all the votes that Vice President Harris messed. Go look at all the votes that J.D. Vance messed when he was running as vice president. But he showed up when he was needed. When there's votes that they know that they're only going to win by one, he gets there. So does Hunt. Because at least Hunt doesn't have all the skeletons in his closet that Paxton does. Now everybody goes, oh, he's got money from AIPAC. It's less than $100,000. He's got less than $500,000 of his funds have come from AIPAC. And in a race that's costing tens of millions of dollars, $200,000 is not enough to buy his vote. It's not even a drop in the effing bucket. That's like a couple days worth of ads. It's pennies. It's not like some of the other people like, let's see, the Democrats are the ones that have taken the majority of the money from AIPAC that are in the multi-millions, which makes no sense that AIPAC claims to be a Jewish American community, but yet they the only people that have gotten above $1 million from them are all Democrats, and the Democrats are the ones that have been all anti-Semitic and supporting all these anti-Jewish rhetoric stuff. I don't get it, but it's.
I get it, but I'm not going to go there right now. We'll just leave it at that.
Yep. But all right, well, I guess I'll go ahead and get into the closing. It's thank goodness that X finally got their shit back in gear, and the live started going back out at post, because the last 2 lives that we've done have hardly had any views on them, and now it's back up to normal. That's nice. It was our YouTube channel isn't as high as it's been, but at least the La Native and Patriots Prayer Network, which we broadcast on, are back up and onto the normal views where we were. So here we reject kings, but we also reject paralysis. The Constitution created energy in the executive and accountability through structure. If you value constitutional discussion, like and follow or subscribe now. Also, share this episode with someone you think needs to hear what we had to say. And don't forget to check out our website, No Kings on the Hill with drhilllaw.com, as you see going across the banner there, and sign up for free to access our weekly blog and let us know how we are doing, and if there is any specific topic you'd like to hear or something you'd like to see change about the structure of the show. Comment your strongest disagreement. This is No Kings on the Hill, and constitutional literacy matters. See you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, and 3 p.m. Pacific time. And thanks for watching No Kings on the Hill. And also, again, do not forget to check us out at CPAC in less than a month now, where we will be broadcasting all 3 days for at least 2 hours a day. And thank you, and have a good evening. See y'all next time.